candidates this year. And I have paid attention, and I know these guys. We've talked on Zoom meetings and things like that. And it's delightful in an era when we can't find a secretary for the State Radio Council to have three highly qualified people want to run for election as division director. Because as we all know, they make a fortune doing that. In fact, the fortune is something that comes in a cookie that you break in half and read it. That's about the value of it, serving the position. If it weren't for the honor of the thing, it'd be a terrible job, I'm thinking. At any rate, the candidates are the incumbent, Bud Hippisley, W2RU. He's from Pinhook, Virginia, and he is being challenged by Dr. Jim Bonner, N2ZZ of Aiken, South Carolina. Jim was our division director until just a couple of years ago. And Marvin Hoffman, WA4NC of Boone, North Carolina. And Marv is the section manager for North Carolina. So all three are experienced. I don't see Marvin on here. I did see that oh, there he is. I'm sorry, Marv, I overlooked you. So let's start with you, and you make a hopefully brief but thorough statement about what you're doing.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dan. Thank you for the West Virginia Amateur Radio State Council for the opportunity to meet with you today. Since I'm a Tar Heel, but a different kind of mountaineer, I hear that there are mountaineers in West Virginia, but I'm an Appalachian State University mountaineer. I live in Boone, North Carolina. I'm up in the mountains near where Virginia, Tennessee, and North Carolina converge. I'm about 5 miles from the Blue Ridge Parkway and about 15 miles from the Appalachian Trail, 3,850 feet above sea level, surrounded by mountains that are approximately 5,800 feet in elevation. And I am largely unknown to people in West Virginia, so I appreciate the opportunity to introduce myself. If I may, I just want to touch on some of my background, since, again, I say that I have not been well known in North Carolina. I am the section manager in North Carolina, ending my first term. I have taught at Appalachian State University in the Department of Government and Justice Studies for 29 years, although I retired 10 years ago. I have an extra class license. I got my first class commercial radio telephone license in 1975. I've been a licensed ham for 30 years. In fact, yesterday was the 30th anniversary of my getting my first ham license. I served for 5 years as president of the Watauga Amateur Radio Club and took a club that was struggling, almost dying, and doubled the membership and got the other people, after 5 years as president, got other people involved in it, and now we have 50 members. So I feel that taking a club from 8 to 40 and now up to 50 is an achievement that is at least worth mentioning. I am heavily involved in repeater operation and maintenance. I maintain, I heard people talking earlier about DMR. I'm heavily involved in DMR. I have 2 of the 60 PRN system repeaters that are operating in North and South Carolina. We have recently added a capability to bring up 15 of those on demand for MCOM operations. And I hope that Wednesday and Thursday, when what remains of Hurricane Ida doesn't cause us to have to activate our Western Branch DMR network, but we have that capability. So I'm heavily involved in emergency management. I'm part of the Western Branch, that's the Western Third of North Carolina, incident management team. I've taken all of the necessary ICS courses up to and including ICS 400, I'm a state-sponsored DMO, excuse me, a state-sponsored Oxcom instructor. I'm a VE for ARRL, West Cars, and Laurel. I come from a family of public servants. My father was a volunteer fire chief. My brother was a fireman. I served as a fire chief in Boone, North Carolina. My brother's son, my nephew, the fireman, that's third generation, and his two children are first responders. So that's the fourth generation, and as near as I can determine, the three children of my nephew's children, his grandchildren, are all in line to become first responders, just like the rest of the family. So that will be 5 generations. So public service has been a big part of my life. I have served as a city manager, as a county manager. I taught public management, not-for-profit management at Appalachian, and I'm a disaster services volunteer, disaster services technology person. So that's who I am, and I'll hush and take questions when it's appropriate. But I have some ideas as to why I would like to be on the ARRL board, and when it's appropriate, I'll discuss that.
Thank you, Marv. The next candidate is Dr. Jim Bonner. I know it looks like Bonner, but it's Bonner, trust me. I was married to one of those who spelled it correctly. Jim?
Okay. Are you able to hear me?
You sound fine.
Okay, I have a little bit of a script. I'm going to do my best. I don't want to bore anybody because, you know, candidate speeches just tend to be boring, but I'm going to do my best. I wanted to give you a history. I was originally invited to the West Virginia State Convention by Ann Reinhardt, who we all miss, when I just came over to the vice director spot. The minute after winning the election, she contacted me, and it was a little rough because Hal Turley was the other candidate. So came right up and said, I'll fly up to Charleston. How do I get there? And says, well, I'll take you. So she and Greg brought me up to the mill, and we continued that tradition for the next around through 2018. And I kind of followed the transition of the history of both John Canode and Dennis Bodson, who apparently had gone to the West Virginia Hamfest for I don't know how many years. We're talking 30, 35 years. It was huge when I found that out. So I was happy to continue that tradition. This really was my favorite Hamfest because West Virginia is absolutely beautiful in late summer, and I had a great time. So just as far as this, I see a lot of faces that I remember. And as a matter of fact, I see Jim and Dan, our 2 auctioneers, right on top of each other. So that was the first thing I saw on my screen. So that's great. Let me give you some experience. I was the South Carolina section manager from 2003 through 2010, and then the vice director of the Roanoke division from 2010 to 2015, at which time Dr. Bodson decided to retire and leave the division in my hands. I continued on until 2018. The experience is a good thing. I've had a lot of times, and what I found out on the board is that those directors that have been section managers in the past and with extensive experiences being section managers, it makes it much more easy to understand the field service and how it interacts with the entire ARRL structure. So that was something that was very humbling. And I was amazed talking to some people on the board that they really didn't understand how the field service worked and what it was all about. I basically, while I was section manager, vice director, and director, ended up going to pretty much all the Hamfests, or a very great number of Hamfests within my division or within my area of responsibility. I also supported other section managers and went there. Thought that the outreach of the league and speaking with members was the most important thing ever because it puts a face on the league. And also, when I was into the vice director and director, to support the section managers in the various sections because it just makes it easier if you have more than one person that is there. I also traveled to field-day sites annually. I don't think I made it to West Virginia, but every single day from the time I was section manager up through the director, I made sure I was on the road. I and met people, had a chance to interact with the public and also public officials. I think was a very important thing and important for amateur radio. Now, one of the things, I'm not going to bore everyone, I could probably get a list, but I do have a broad base of knowledge in amateur radio because I'm interested in many, many things. I guess you'd say jack of all trades, master of none, but there's a lot of stuff. Marv touched on DMR repeaters and everything, and I'm very heavily into DMR, but not via the PRN network. I'm there from a different direction, and also have a repeater at the hospital that we have. As far as operating, HF has been the thing that really makes amateur radio great to me, and I've been on a number of things, and you'll be able to look on my QRZ page, which I invite everybody to do, so I don't have to bore everyone what I do, but I really enjoy DX. That was the first thing that really got me. That is after shortwave listening, and yes, I think someone mentioned, I think Mike mentioned the CB phrase, or I did CB before it was popular, but that's where my Elmer found me and brought me into amateur radio. So the advantage I think I had by having a broad depth is that I'm not concrete in the way I think things need to be done. I think that as things change, we need to adapt, whether it be emergency services, NTS, or even the award categories. We have to be flexible. Remote operating made a big difference in here. We had to be flexible for that. So there's just a number of things being an advantage of having a broad base of knowledge. As far as responsive, I do have a known track record. If someone needed something from the league, if they needed a convention that needed to be approved or a decision made as to who was going to be a sanctioned hamfest, I was there. Because I think, I've mentioned before that I think clubs are really the background of amateur radio, but where everybody meets are the hamfests. It's important to have that person-to-person contact because that really makes amateur radio great for everybody. Now, as all of these positions I've been in, I've always kind of gravitated over to the leadership roles, one of the others. I had unofficial roles with the section managers in which I kind of maintain the communications between the section managers and was up in that. And when I was at Dayton, they usually would ask me to talk with the section managers and the rest. I also kind of convinced the ARRL to say, look, we got section managers here. Can we get them shirts? Can we get them dealer passes and everything? Let's broaden our horizons here and have more people out there marketing for the league. Fortunately, Harold Kramer agreed with me, and so did Don Indervitson. And the next year, the section managers were recognized in a better position. So I was very happy about that. When I was vice director, people don't know the dynamics of the board, but basically the idea was directors have all of the power, vice directors have none, and the vice directors pretty much weren't listened to. I think over my many years as vice director, I think I finally got people to listen, and right after I ended up getting out of the position, I think they even elevated the vice directors to a higher level. So I think that was important. As a director, I ended up on the Programs and Services Committee, and that basically dealt with all the interesting things that we do, DX, public service, emergency communications, and I have to say that was my toughest leadership role. Now it's split up. Now there's another standing committee that's going to be handling the emergency communications and the rest. But I felt that there were two ways to handle this. I had been on the PSC before, and there was a way to handle it passively, and there was a way to handle it actively. Basically, I was very active. I got things to happen. There were things that were just was not into receiving reports and doing nothing about them. So it was quite a time. I felt like I was a target most of the time, but I have to say I'm very proud of what I did on that. I remember coming to the board with 13 motions that needed to pass the board. What I did is pull 2 because I thought they really didn't have a chance, but I got all the other 11 passed. And I felt it. That was tough work. Fortunately, the next 2 years, they invited me to, well, they actually elected me to be on the executive committee. I won't say that's a pasture, but it was a whole lot easier because the president takes all the heat and all the members just kind of add to that. So I needed the rest. I was happy to be there, and I was also happy to continue in a leadership role. As far as representation for all, with a wide interest, I can represent just about anybody. And if I don't understand what's going on, I'll find it. Now, if you're into moon bounce, you're on your own. I know nothing about moon bounce, but I do know some stuff about satellites. I haven't really actively done it, but I've basically my capabilities here are 160 through 1296. So I've done a lot of stuff. So if you've got an issue or something that you need to get through with the league, I will represent you and I'll represent you well. As far as emergency service, Mark touched on that, and he's very much into emergency services. And I want to read something to you. I want you to go to our Part 97. The first Part 97, amateur radio #1 purpose is recognition and enhancement of the amateur service to the public as a voluntary non-commercial communication service, particularly with respect to providing emergency communications. That's the first thing listed. So we have a responsibility. I don't think everybody has to participate. Some people like emergencies, communications, some don't. Some say, look, I'm not going to participate if there's an emergency. My station's at your disposal. We'll do whatever we can. But at least as far as FEMA goes, and you folks can help me, I was there when they signed our MOA, or Memorandum of Understanding with FEMA, and we are responsible for emergency service functions 6 and 15. And of those 6 and 15, that's something that we need to have response rights. We need to have it with communications. We need to have areas ready for it and the rest. Now, Marv also mentioned Oxcom. Every time I mentioned Oxcom, I got the cold shoulder from people at the league. I think I know why, but it is very important that they handle ESF2 communications in many states, and we have to make some sort of arrangements with them, either an MOA or figure a way to work with them, because this will enhance our ability to be able to serve the public better. So all of you that are not into emergency communications, cool, it's okay. But for those people that are interested, of which, at least when I was director, 50% or more than 50% of the new people getting the amateur radio were doing it primarily for emergency communications. So we have a lot of people that are interested. You don't have to be into emergency services if you don't want to, but it's there if you want. And it's important that we get the respect of the public agencies and let them know that we are a viable source. I remember Mike talking about communications levels 1 through 3. When I was section manager, I took those 3 not because I was an ARRL member, but I am an ARRL member, but because I needed to know how to administrate this. I had to know what they're thinking, how to be able to handle it, and they were very valuable. Since then, I have the basic courses for ICS, and over time I'll probably do more, but it's important to understand every phase of amateur radio if you're going to properly represent them. So I can mention, again, I've got stuff on my QRZ page, and I really don't want to add too much to that. I do have an operating award, the Roanoke Division Service Award, which I'm very proud of. As far as members' fees, the league has talked about forever. I remember when they took away senior discounts, and that caused an uproar like crazy. And people coming into the hobby, they may have 3 months to be able to be on the website. But I do support the fact that we should look at doing something for the people that are older in the profession, also most younger, the new people, and also an age-adjusted fee for life member. It makes no sense for someone that's 60 or 65 to try to buy a full life membership. So let me mention a couple of things. I have concerns, and I'm sure that the reasons for it, but I've been on the sidelines. I was in the ARRL for 16 years, and of course I was watching on the outside, and again, kind of feeling a little helpless about it. But I've noticed several things. One is we've lost a frequency band, maybe 3 gigahertz, but we lost a frequency band. We now have lost our exemption for RF exposure limits. That's kind of a concern. And we now have FCC licensing fees. We have all of that. We have many things that are on the boilerplate at FCC that have not been touched. I mentioned something today about 2013 was when the symbol rate thing went out. Nothing has been done. It is now 2021. Question is there something I know that they ended up getting a new legal counsel and apparently had worked for the FCC before, but apparently there's been no action with the FCC. The other thing of which was given a very black eye was the Amateur Radio Parity Act, which would have given those people in HOAs a chance to be able to have a dialogue with their HOA. In West Virginia, you may not be having this problem, probably closer to the panhandle you are. But in other places, 95%, and I'm not sure about the actual amount, but for example, in North Carolina, 95% of all them, he's waving, is this too long? It's too long, I'm sorry. Okay, all right. So anyway, let's just say I was not happy that that didn't pass. And I would just like to say in closing, I think I need a red light flashing or something here. I don't know if I can make a difference of all the stuff that's going on the board. I know that the board, it's likened to sausage making, something that you like to enjoy after it's done, but you just don't want to watch it in action. But I know I can't do it on the sidelines. I got to be there. So in summary, I do have many more years of ARRL leadership experience and would recognize leadership, multiple interests in amateur radio, and a much more effective representative for you as well. We do need stability on the board and an organization of the whole to move forward. I thought long and hard about running for a director again, wondering if I could make a difference. My decision was I needed a chance to do so. Respectfully, I ask for your vote, and I will turn it back to Dan, and thank you. I should have a timer here.
That's supposed to be my job, and I failed at that. Thank you, Jim. Our third candidate is our incumbent, Bud, W2RU. Bud?
Thank you, Dan. Hello to Marv. Hello to Jim. Dr. Jim and I go back many, many years to Central New York. Long time ago. And a special shout out to Steve, K8JQ. He and I have been active together in a number of things over the years on the high frequency bands, and it's good to see him in the crowd this afternoon. Well, I had understood that this three-way thing was going to be some very simple and short comments, and that's basically what I'll have at this point. Like the other two candidates, I have a past with a number of other appointments or elective offices. I've served not as section manager, but section communications manager, the predecessor. I've also been section emergency coordinator and assistant emergency coordinator and an ordinary rank and file ARRL member for many years in many locations. And I too, I absolutely agree that we should trot out that paragraph 97.1 periodically and read what is the basis and purpose of the amateur radio service, and I'll underline service. We typically wind up calling it a hobby, but it's more than a hobby. It's a service. It's a service to the country and to the world, and to our families and ourselves, and it's an activity in which there are many. All of you come to this meeting with a variety of interests in amateur radio, and that's exactly as it should be. Not everyone has to be involved in MCOM, as was just mentioned, but that is one of our purposes. Most recently, as you must know by now, most of my activity has not been on the air. It's been related to being on the board of directors, and it's been essentially very close to a full-time job, not so much because of being on the board, but because of the various committees on the board and all the topics that are active at any given time. I'm a member of the executive committee. That probably sounds more important than it turns out to be, because we actually have a fairly limited set of topics that we are engaged in between board meetings, and the existence of Zoom and other video conferencing techniques these days has allowed the board to stay, the full board to stay more actively involved in stuff that's going on between the formal board meetings, the 2 board meetings each month. I would characterize the activities of the board in the time I've been on it as primarily working to internally, at least, working to modernize the board and modernize the league, actually. And we have a CEO who's been an active amateur all of his amateur radio career. He brings to the league this culture of yes, which is wonderful to see, and working very hard to improve the service aspects of the organization. I strongly support things we're doing with new publications. Just in the mail today was my latest copy of On the Air magazine, which Mike Walters mentioned earlier today. And there's QEX and a bunch of others that are available as well. We have newly established rate for life members who are above a certain age. We've reinstituted the time payment plan for the life membership, which was another sticking point for some of our members. So we're trying to do things that are more member centric, and I'm all in support of that. As you will notice if you read the minutes of the July board meeting, I introduced a motion which passed, which basically took the activities of the Programs and Services Committee and split them into 2 standing committees. And the new committee is the Emergency Communications and Field Services Committee. And fundamental difference now between the 2 committees is that Programs and Services deals primarily with programs that are for amateurs themselves. Contests, DXing, DX awards, logbook of the world, things of that nature. The new committee is primarily concerned with those activities and those volunteers whose tasks are largely aimed at interfacing with the public around us, whether it's emergency communications or public information, or helping new individuals become new amateurs. That's probably an oversimplification, but it's a fairly quick way of describing what's going on. So as we get into the bulk of the forum here, Bill Marine and I will talk to you about some of these activities that are going on. And I just want to say, I want to thank both Marv for his service in various roles over the years, and Dr. Jim for his service as well. I think even though we may differ in what the best approach may be to accomplish things, I don't doubt the sincerity of commitment to the league, to amateur radio, to the communities that we live in, of 3 of us. So Dan, back to you.
Thank you, Bud. I want to give Marv a couple of more minutes. We talked a lot about individual motivations, and he kind of waived his for a Q&A session. So Marv, if you would, for just a few minutes, please, talk about what it is that you hope to accomplish on the board of directors.
Okay, Dan. Well, thank you. Do I still have audio? Because once it flickered. Okay. Okay. Well, thank you. Communications and outreach is a very important part of what I do as section manager. And I think that the Roanoke Division Director can do more in terms of outreach and communication to the membership. As section manager, I have produced 48 section newsletters that I share with members and non-members, telling them about amateur radio activities in North Carolina. Outreach, big deal. I went to the Berryville Ham Fest. I talked to probably 250 hams there at the Berryville Ham Fest. I was at the Roanoke Ham Fest at the church parking lot in the flea market. I didn't have to do that. I did it because I believe in outreach to hams. I went to the Cape Fear Swap Fest in Fayetteville, North Carolina. I will be at the Shelby Amateur Radio Club Ham Fest next weekend. Outreach is a big deal with me. I think that the Roanoke division has not had as much open communication to the membership that they deserved. And if I'm elected, I would change that. Another thing that I believe is that the opportunities are insufficient for hams to give much input to the board. I would push for the committee reports to be publicly posted at least 10 days before each meeting so that members could read the committee reports and have an opportunity to give input to the board members. As it is now, those I keep saying section reports, those committee reports are not released in sufficient time for any ham to say, hey, I think that this is what I think on this particular issue. And then the minutes, there is really, in my opinion, based on 12 years of service as a city manager, as a county manager, there's no plausible reason why minutes can't be produced faster than 6 weeks after a meeting. So I think the board is not doing a very good job as far as outreach in a timely way to the members. And if I'm on the board, I would push for that. I know I would only be one vote on any matter and I might fail, but openness would be something that I would push for much more diligently than the board as a whole has supported. Finally, on the topic of MCOM, I hear weekly, daily at times, several times a week, about the importance of MCOM in the future of amateur radio. The FCC's told the ARRL that MCOM, if they don't get more actively involved in MCOM or let MCOM become a lower priority, and let's talk about the priority. I've heard that there's 80 employees. I've heard there's 100 employees at ARRL. I don't know which number is correct, but I know that there's 1.5 of those positions out of 80 or 100 that are devoted to MCOM. And the FCC says MCOM is important to the future of amateur radio. I don't know why it's not a more important staffing priority with the ARRL. So those are some things that I think are important. And thank you, Dan, for the opportunity to express them.
Thank you, Mark. Those are the 3 candidates for division director. You will be receiving, if you are a member of the ARRL on September 10th, 2021. That means that you've still got time to join. And if you send me an email, I will send you an application and you get a free book if you re-up or renew or join through the section manager. I'd be happy to do that. I'll send it to you by email. You can fill it out, send it in with your check or your credit card number yourself. The election will take place. You will receive the ballot in the mail no later than October 1st, and it's due back in Newington no later than noon on November 19th. So you'll have some time to think about it, talk among yourselves, as they say on TV, and decide for whom you wish to vote. I'm very, very pleased that we have 3 active and interested amateurs seeking to be division director. It's easy to stand up and say, oh yeah, I'd like to be division director because that would make me important. We have people applying for all kinds of positions within the league, at the section level, at the division level. These are not jobs that you get for the honor of the thing or to put it on your ham radio resume. These are jobs that you are promising to work at, promising to do the best you can. Our candidates have some differing views on some things, but I can tell you that I am pleased to see them running because I think they are all capable of being of value to the ARRL. We have another candidate for a position, and that's Bill Maureen. He's our current vice director, and he was just declared elected because no one could think of a reason to impeach him apparently this year. So he ran unopposed. Bill, please don't tell us what you're going to do. We know what you're going to do. You've been doing it, but just say a few words to introduce yourself. And then I want to get to questions for our division director candidates.
Hey, thank you, Dan, and good evening, good afternoon, everybody. I was not on video for most of it because I was driving. I'm currently coming to you from Durham, North Carolina, where I'm visiting my son, daughter-in-law, and my grandson right now. We just got here a little while ago. I did join by audio during the discussion about the hot dogs and how to prepare them. And I want you all to know that there's nothing at ARRL that we relish more than a frank discussion.
You're clearly a wiener in all of our opinions.
Well, it's good. I'm not going to tie it up. I just do want to say thank you, everybody. I don't quite know whether the lack of opposition is in the vice director slot was a vote of confidence or not. Regardless, it has been my privilege to serve not only members of the Roanoke division, but of the West Virginia section for the last 7 years. And I look forward to continuing in that slot. And I too am grateful that we have 3 very qualified individuals who are seeking the office of director, and be my privilege to work with any of them also.
Thank you, Bill. And I should mention, I haven't seen a formal announcement, but I got a letter telling me that the guy who was up for election for section manager in West Virginia was reelected. So whoever that was, more power to him. Well, not more power because he doesn't have any to begin with, but there you go. All right, I think we should spend the rest of our time allowing you to ask questions among the division director candidates. If anybody would like to ask a question, you have a button that would be really nice. If you click on the participants button down at the bottom of your screen, well, no, it's, I'm sorry, the reactions button. You will see an item that says raise your hand. If you would click on that, if you have a question, that would make life much easier for at least me. So if anybody have a question, click on raise hand and we'll go ahead. And if you can't find that button, say something. No questions? Bud?
Yeah, this is not so much a question as a statement. I spent part of yesterday and part of this morning on matters related to Hurricane Ida. And I just want to say to folks that there are a number of hurricane-related nets and alerting activities active at the moment, partly Hurricane Ida and partly still the Haitian relief traffic. The Haitian stuff is on 3750, 7150, 14330, depending on propagation and the time of day. Of course, the Hurricane Watch net is on 14325, 7268, and Louisiana has coordination nets on 7255 and 3878. So all of those groups would certainly appreciate it if the rest of us would stay away from those activities. The other part of that I was active with overnight is that it was decided in the Louisiana discussion last night to seek an STA, a special temporary authorization for the waiving the symbol rate for the higher speed data transmissions, Pactor 4, Vera, and ones like that. That has been in what's got to be lightning time submitted and approved already by the FCC. So as needed for hurricane purposes, and only for hurricane purposes. Those waivers are now in effect, and they're in effect for the next 60 days to cover the remainder of the hurricane season. So if any of your emergency communications people care to know about that, you can pass that on. But I suspect perhaps even by the end of today, there will be news releases out from on ARRL.org and maybe a special bulletin on W1AW. That's all I wanted to say on that. Over.
Thank you, Bud. If you have not been paying attention to National Weather Service advisories, there is very serious concern about what's going to happen to New Orleans and surrounding territories as a result of this hurricane. It looks like it may be another Katrina type event, and that's not good. I will say, however, that shortly after the Puerto Rican hurricane response some years ago, I was at headquarters for what they call section manager orientation or training. And I got to see how the league responded to the situation in Puerto Rico. And it was amazing. If you want to be proud of an organization, you can be proud of the way ARRL responded to that emergency. And I'm sure there were some lessons learned that will make a response from the league, if it becomes appropriate and necessary, more effective this time around. So again, any questions for our candidates? Then let me